Hello and welcome and good morning. We're in fact in Liverpool today, and I just want to very quickly and briefly say we're delighted that everybody's here. Everyone will be introduced through the day. We've got quite a lot of people involved in today. But my name is Zoe Partington, the CEO of DaDa, and we're just delighted really that DaDaFest is able to help host this event here today and online. So just a really big thank you to everyone that's involved.
Thanks, Zoe. I'm Colin Hambrook. I am microphone's just being. Yeah, I'm Colin Hambrook. I'm the founding editor of Disability Arts Online. I'm a white man, older, not wiser, a bit grey, wearing a flowery purple shirt and glasses. And it's wonderful to be here at DaDaFest. It's always been one of my favourite festivals in the disability arts circuit, and I'm really excited to introduce everyone here and online to the Telepresence Stage project. Telepresence represents, to my mind, a very new form of digital theatre that creates access for disabled performers in ways that we've not encountered before. It's got a very unique aesthetic and feel to it, and it was a great privilege for me to introduce the Telepresence Stage team to CRIPtic Arts and to Birds of Paradise Theatre. I was really delighted that they took on the challenge of getting involved and developing two pieces which we're going to get some presentations from Bop and from CRIPtic about those pieces that they created, which we've also showcased on Disability Arts Online, along with a podcast with Jamie Hale, which I'd urge you to check out also. The links are in the YouTube channel, I believe. And yeah, without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Paul Sermon, who's the lead investigator on the Telepresence Stage project.
Great. Thank you very much, Colin. Yes, so hello. I'm Paul Sermon. I'm a white male in my late 50s with a grey beard and grey, brownish, wavy hair, receding hairline, black rimmed glasses. I'm wearing a brightly coloured scarf and a blue jumper. So I'll be starting this event by introducing the Telepresence Stage. I'm a digital media artist and professor of visual communication at the University of Brighton, and I've been leading this research project, a Telepresence Stage for Disability Performing Arts, since December 2023, which is a follow-on project from our original COVID project, our COVID response project, Collaborative Solutions for the Performing Arts, a Telepresence Stage. And that was from November 2020 until May 2022. So I spent 30 years working with telematics or telecommunication arts, including video conference and coexistent telepresence. And I was often contacted during the pandemic for advice and comment on how to approach our new COVID-found video existence. So since the early 90s, I've taken a phenomenological approach to combine and relocate distant participants in various familiar settings in social and fictional contexts, from life-size projections on shared beds, sitting together on the same green screen sofa, to peace negotiation tables and sharing the same telepresence stage. So Colin's going to help me by doing my audio description of my slides as we're going to go through them.
And here we've got two images side by side, taken in a darkened room, and in the first photo a drawn figure, a video figure, and a third projected figure lie on a bed across from each other, and in the second photo one figure is projected on the other.
So although my practice often often centres on this particular piece, telematic dreaming, as a prime example of third space telepresence. By interacting on a projected bed surface, the most effective sense of telepresence actually occurs through the screens that surround these beds, showing the live video image, the live video feed of the projected body and the gallery visitor superimposed together. The participants actually preferred to rely on the two screens on either side of the bed to navigate and control their interactions, but more importantly, preferring to shift their experience into the reflected third space. So the screen wasn't watched, it was entered like a portal to a coexistent space. And in doing so, they could leave their physical vulnerabilities behind, along with their self-conscious inhibitions, to engage in a specular image through the observation of the self as other. That's a kind of description of what telepresence is. So in this image.
Here we see two images that exemplify the use of a green screen. In the left-hand photo shows two women sitting in separate spaces while a TV monitor on a stand shows them sharing the same space in real time. The right-hand photo shows two figures interacting from different spaces. They're experimenting with moving towards each other, a green screen in the background.
So this piece, telematic vision, therefore relied purely on video screens, removing the superimposed video projection technique from the installation by replacing it with a system of live chroma keying between video screens in two remote locations. The screens on each side of the sofas significantly enhanced the spatial sense of presence, providing a means of both observation and displacement of the self. So in my installations, the participants not only share the reflection of the self, but also the gaze upon the other from the same remote location, the same remote camera location. They are effectively sharing the same eyes, the same point of view, where one's gaze on the other and view of the self are conflated. The objectification of the gaze is confronted on equal empathetic terms through this process of sharing our presence in a third space environment from a single viewpoint. Literally seeing something from someone else's point of view. So you're looking through each other's eyes, basically. So let's just go to the next slide.
All right, yeah. And here we see an image of a series of 8 numbered TV screens illustrating the process of the monitor being most present in the first to the 8th screen, where the screen has all but disappeared. As we go through a series of scenarios, blank screen, test card, newsreader, a televised theatre, a TV drama, a film that puts audience centre stage, and lastly 2 images of first a single figure and then 2 figures on a green screen, where the screen itself is all but non-existent.
So we're going to use a little bit of sort of philosophical background to this, really, just to sort of get us into this conversation. So as the participants begin to discover this third space and their new immersive coexistence, the technology or geographical distance involved were of least concern and essentially disappear. In the same way, this reflects the ontological claim that the phenomenological philosopher Martin Heidegger makes with the example of the hammer as a tool having 2 states: an innate object that is not that when not in use, just purely an object, or as a tool in use performing a task, which is the primary focus of our attention, whereby the object disappears. It's a kind of thing where, as you use something, the object is no longer there. It's no longer an object, an innate object. It's part of your body almost. It's doing a task. So we can similarly use the television screen in this example of these works as an example of Heidegger's hammer. In its off mode, it's clearly a static object occupying space on the table in front of us. But when switched on and through the different degrees of media we engage in, it becomes progressively more immersed. We become progressively more immersed in. The television consequently disappears. Our suspension of disbelief and embodiment in the third-person content gradually supersedes the tool we are using to view it. But in telematic vision, the work I just showed you, this takes us a step further the actions of the embodied character on screen correspond to our own movements through prosthetic agency, reflecting the self in a third space existence, a bodily wholeness constructed as if on stage in front of us. So the final episode in Heidegger's television situates the embodied self-image with another participant with whom we are now sitting and can interact, perform and play. The focus of our attention is now solely on the empathetic encounter between the self as reflected other and the other participant together on the same sofa. At this point, the television itself has completely disappeared, replaced by what is now a portal to a third space coexistence.
And here we see two graphic images.
Sorry.
Oh, no, we don't. We see Paul standing against a large green screen with a TV monitor in the right of the image where interaction with other people is taking place. The image on the right shows multiple versions of Paul interacting with three other figures wearing COVID masks.
So my initial lockdown experiments took place in May 2020 with a project called Pandemic Encounters, where I performed as a live chroma key figure from a green screen installation in my own home, interacting with participating artists from around the world. And in telematic quarantine, I invited participants to join me in an uncanny rendering of my actual house. And together we shared a space to perform, play and improvise in a layered video environment and experience of domesticity, self-isolation, fantasy and dream in COVID times.
And here we see two graphic images side by side. The left-hand image illustrates how a Zoom interaction plays out with 6 figures all contained within their own box. In the right-hand illustration, there's a more complex and layered arrangement of 3 figures in separate green screen boxes, coming together with other elements, a blue screen, a brown triangle, a blue ball, and a pink triangle to create a composite layered image.
So this project, in contrast to the Zoom grid on the left, the remote telepresence performers on the right were overlaid and composited within digital theatre sets, where their full body images could move in between each other and the digital sonography, providing a sense of scale, depth and three-dimensional reality. The video chroma keying was performed using live video production and streaming platform, incorporating web real-time communications, what's referred to as WebRTC, which is an open source protocol for high quality, low latency, peer-to-peer video communications over the web. So it was escaping the boxes of Zoom or Teams, the kind of TV newsreader scenario.
Yeah, and here we see a paper puppet theatre analogy of what telepresence represents. It shows a Victorian-style theatre backdrop with 6 figures who can be inserted onto the stage and an alternate woodland setting on the floor. So it illustrates how different layers can be incorporated.
So, so the compositing concept worked in a similar way to the 19th century paper theatre when thinking about video as a 2D layer to create backdrops, wings, foreground objects and props and performers cut out from their green screen backgrounds using chroma keying techniques, scaled and placed upstage and downstage in a telepresence equivalent of the paper theatre. We're doing much the same here, but in a very 2D sense for this presentation.
Phoenix Dance Theatre shows a woodland landscape. A figure squats as they place their hands on the head of another figure emerging from a hole in the ground.
So the research team worked with 9 distinctive performing arts companies between November 2020 and 2022. Each company undertook a 3-month online residency culminating in a unique telepresence performance, involving up to 4 company members performing together from their separate homes and studios. And participating companies included, here, Phoenix Dance Theatre from Leeds,
Creation Theatre. This photo of Creation Theatre shows 2 photos illustrating scenes in sequence. 2 men appear to be engaging across a table which seems to be solid as the men place their hands or sit on the table.
And this is Creation Theatre from Oxford with their performance of The Card Players.
And this is the Red Ladder Theatre Company with two images, one above the other, illustrating two scenes in sequence. The top image shows the viewpoint of a car mirror with a male driver and woman passenger behind, and the bottom image shows the taxi from in front with the driver at the wheel and a passenger behind him.
Thank you. That's Red Ladder Theatre Company with their performance of Taxi.
And here we have Sharp Teeth Theatre, a zany image of four actors in surreal relationship to each other inside the control room of an Antarctic explorer ship.
So Sharp Teeth Theatre are a company from Bristol, and this was with their online murder mystery Sherlock in Holmes, featuring audience participation.
And this is Improbable Theatre, a paper cutout scene of a street with a washing line held by two hands coming into the picture and a woman sitting reading a book in the middle of the street.
Improbable were an experimental theatre company from London, and their performance was called Outside the Frame.
This is a graphic of a screen setup with several computers on tables, monitors and a camera on a stand.
So each individual performer was supplied with a large green screen backdrop, LED video lights, a webcam and two video monitors positioned on either side of their green screen. This provided them with the ability to monitor the performance on both sides of the green screen, as well as straight ahead using their computer screen, giving them complete observation and control of their telepresence performance from all three available angles.
And this is an image from the current phase, Birds of Paradise Theatre, a complex image showing a sign interpreter on the left above a clock set at 2 a.m. and on the right we see the back of a man washing a large red graphic of a human liver. Inside the graphic are two further characters smiling out from the image.
So this follow-on project looked at how these telepresence stage solutions could be used specifically by the disability performing arts sector. Disabled people utilised the benefits of online communications long before the demands of lockdown and increasingly continue to do so. For many disabled people, the lockdown felt rather like a level playing field, as both disabled and non-disabled people had to work and socialise under the same conditions, benefiting from the advances in online applications, resources and access to the arts that proliferated at the time, which has sadly diminished. A telepresence stage for disability performing arts worked directly with two of the UK's leading disability performing arts companies, Birds of Paradise Theatre Company in Glasgow and CRIPtic Arts in London. And please do make a note of the, if you could take a picture of it or screen grab of the address there for their video, their performance. We won't be showing that today, but you can see it there under that link.
And lastly, this is an image from CRIPtic Arts. Jamie Hale set in the clouds above a cloudscape, smiling from his wheelchair. Below, two figures in a paraglider, legs out, fly through the sky.
So they applied and utilised technological advances made during the previous research to identify new features, techniques and bespoke solutions specifically for disability performing arts sector. Both companies undertook the Telepresence Stage residency programme, lasting this time up to 6 months, to develop unique public performance outcomes using and adapting the developed tools and techniques to access and engage previously restricted participants and audiences. So again, quality of life is not a measurable outcome. The web address for that video link is there. I'm not going to say any more about those projects now because I'm going to let them talk about those videos and that work during the projects, during their presentations. Thank you very much. Okay, great, thank you. We're going to go to our panel discussion. We have a few minutes now before our next presentation.
Oh yeah. Firstly, I was going to ask anyone from the audience if there are any questions. Have we got the roving mic? No? No. Okay. So, Jane, can you tell us about your role as co-investigator in responding to the current phase of telepresence?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Jane. I am a white woman with brown hair that's tied back, and I'm wearing a long black dress and a blue and grey patterned jacket. I am a co-investigator on the Telepresence Stage project and a senior lecturer in Fine Arts at the University of Brighton. It's been a really fantastic project to work on. I think my role in it has been perhaps slightly different to roles I've had in previous projects and how I anticipated it, but it's been really fantastic. I came to the research with a background in collaborative and participatory work with disabled artists and disabled people who may or may not consider themselves artists. And usually as a researcher I tend to, alongside my researching role, also have a facilitation or organisation role and some maybe a bit more involvement in the co-producing and creative content of the artwork. And I think in this project it's been really interesting because I've been able to take on more of an observer role and see an overview of the project and see learn about the telepresence and also see how both CRIPtic Arts and Birds of Paradise Theatre companies have applied that, and my role also involves kind of contributing to events like this and evaluations and publications. But I think what has been really interesting for me and really helped me see the value of this work is that I joined the project after a period of working on trying to run creative projects during the pandemic on Teams and Zoom and being in the kind of box that Paul described. And I really saw through the Telepresence Stage and the way the theatre companies worked with it, how it kind of offered an alternative to that and a much better, more engaging alternative, and how it became part of the creative process. And I think we'll hear later a bit more about how it goes beyond access and other forms of audience engagement.
Yeah, people can join from anywhere in the world to perform together within the same telepresence environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just a kind of recording or access to what is a live performance, but each of those spaces, whether you're joining remotely or participating remotely or performing remotely, are all kind of equally valued and kind of it's not about kind of projecting the live performance in the theatre or wherever it is to another place. It's about bringing people together in those different spaces.
Yeah, and it has a kind of unique kind of cut-out collage kind of aesthetic to it, which
Absolutely.
which adds to the flavour in a very unique way.
I think that it's good. I think it's a really good point you're making there. So I think one of the things it does feel very cut out. It does feel quite sort of. It's not. This isn't cutting edge CGI, but it doesn't want to be. It shouldn't be in actual fact, because this is it's live theatre, and there shouldn't be any confusion in the viewers understanding that they're watching a recorded video. They want to watch a piece of live theatre and feel as though there is a craft being made in front of them, there and then. It is happening real time, which is why it relies on that. And I think that it's to its benefit actually.
Yeah. There's something very unique about the conversations that you have with the artists about developing the backgrounds and the scenography.
Exactly. Yeah. These things, play a really important part. And I think it's actually a lot of the experience, and you'll get this, I think, from some of the presentations from our artists taking part. A lot of the experience is really from the performers who took part, really benefited from that experience of understanding themselves in this other space, performing in this other space. And actually what the challenge really is to let the audience have that experience as well. And some people have tried that, and that is an ongoing sort of ambition and aim, really, that to make this feel a kind of much more inclusive experience for audience members as well as the performers.
Yeah. We're going to hear from Morna and Màiri.
Exactly, yes.
At BOP.
Is that now, Colin?
Yeah,
it is.
It is.
Okay, great. We're going to go to our presentation, so we're going to have to little shift around with some audio, I think. So we're going to be upping and downing different audio now. So let's go to our presentation from Birds of Paradise Theatre Company.
Hello, everybody. My name is Màiri Taylor. I'm the Executive Director at Birds of Paradise Theatre Company. I am a very pale white Scottish woman in her mid-40s. My hair is tied back and I am wearing glasses with a purple rim, and I have little sparkly dangly earrings on.
Hi, I'm Morna, McGeoch, and I am the Development Officer at Birds of Paradise Theatre Company. I am a white Scottish person with shoulder-length, box-dyed, reddish-brown hair and large dark frame glasses. I'm wearing all black, which is my norm.
We are with you today because we're going to talk about our Telepresence residency and the work that we've undertaken with Paul and his team through the project. And we're going to talk specifically about a multi-partner international residency where we commissioned an artist based in Hong Kong. So we're going to take you through the process of that project and what we developed during that time and what we learnt, and also importantly, what we might do differently in the future.
We're going to start with a bit of background to Birds of Paradise Theatre Company. And in order to do that, we have a showcase video which tells you all about the work that we do.
The trailer also introduced the fact that we think very much of ourselves as working across three strands. So we have our theatre strand of work where we make our main stage productions. We have our BOP strategic work, which is supporting others to be more accessible within the arts sector. And we also have our BOP development strand of work. We're just going to pop up a visual onto the screen, which talks about these three areas of work and the outcomes in each area. So for BOP theatre, we're wanting to make theatre that's more representative and accessible. And for BOP strategic, we're making a theatre sector, supporting a theatre sector that's more diverse and inclusive. And through our BOP development strand, we're very much working with ensuring that disabled artists are recognised for their experience. And to do that, we create various opportunities under BOP development, and it's under our BOP development work that Telepresence ultimately sat for us. And Morna is going to talk to you a little bit about her role in BOP development and work that's happened over the last couple of years that actually created a really strong foundation for Telepresence to come into our company.
As part of my work with BOP Young Artists, which is a development programme that I run within BOP, we created an access-centred arts platform, digital arts platform, that centres the experience of disabled people and allows that to be in a widely accessible digital space. And so, yeah, that platform is called Locked World.
When Paul first approached us and we started to think about how we could apply Telepresence or create a sort of a residency project for it, what developed over time was an understanding that there was two potential approaches that we would like to explore and two potential applications. We were really taken by the fact that the best way to understand Telepresence was to experience it. And we will come back to that, I think, and talk a bit about that through the presentation and towards the end. And it was through experiencing it that Morna and I could really feel where we could explore both creatively embedded access and making work and putting it online. But we were also really taken by the fact that the impact of that embodied experience, both for audience members within a creative piece, but also potentially in an engagement setting, So we have a visual that would pop up, which is just sort of talking about these two potential approaches that we were going to be exploring. And one was to create an artwork, so commissioning a disabled artist to make an artwork for Locked World, but specifically looking also at creatively embedded access within that. And then we also wanted to explore the engagement potential of using it for online workshop or creative spaces. So then, yes, online spaces that would allow disabled people to feel more involved and embodied while working remotely and working with us, on a development or a creative opportunity. That second approach of the engagement angle, we'd hope to take forward with a project that we're currently undertaking in Nepal. In fact, as you're watching this, we are in Nepal just now doing that project. But that became too challenging, and we can talk about that at the end, because I think it's part of the learning. So we're going to launch off now, focusing very much on where the artwork opportunity developed and how we did end up going about commissioning a disabled artist.
So we're going to take you through this process in sort of 6 stages. So we've just got a little visual on screen to help to visualize that that process, and we'll walk you through it. So we've got the spark, building understanding, communicating the opportunity, supporting understanding, developing the artwork, and sharing the artwork. We're just going to go through those stages one at a time. So first up, the spark. So we had this idea that we wanted to commission a disabled artist to make an artwork for Locked World. And then we became aware of British Council Hong Kong's Spark Festival that they run. And this year it was a hybrid arts festival, and it was calling for applications. And we thought it felt like a really great opportunity and very much aligned opportunity to commission a Hong Kong-based artist to make a piece of work for Locked World using creatively embedded access and also using telepresence, and creating that for an online and an in-person audience, because the Spark Festival took place at the Airside Shopping Centre in Hong Kong. So there was an in-person element to that, as well as the online potential of using Locked World as a space for that.
We also had a little bit of history of working in Hong Kong. So we felt able to and confident to start to broker relationships if we were successful with that funding application. We were successful, and that allowed us to start really planning and starting to think about how we would do the call out and building the understanding of how we were using the telepresence technology within that opportunity.
Because we were working with multiple partners, we were working with British Council Hong Kong, and we were working with Arts with the Disabled Association of Hong Kong, so ADAHK. You'll hear us using that acronym. So we were partnered with ADAHK, building that understanding of what telepresence actually is and what that means. And we ended up that we got them to try it out during a knowledge exchange workshop with Paul and the rest of the research team. I'm bringing an image up on screen right now, which might get some oohs and ahs and giggles in the room or in the Zoom. So this is a video still from a telepresent piece of work called Coombe Hill or High Water that Paul Sermon created, and we used it within our starting to work with ADAHK and building that understanding of what telepresence is. So on screen, it's a video still. It's a stylized image of a sort of hilly residential area, and it's filled with murky water about 8 feet deep. And in the image, you can see Michelle, who's part of our staff team at BOP. She's shoulder deep in the water, and she's playing with swimming in the water. And then you've got Kim, who's from the ADAHK staff team, and she's in a wheelie bin, and she is waving and playing around in this space. So, and as Màiri mentioned earlier, we felt that the best way to understand telepresence was to take part in it.
Yeah, and it felt very important for us to have ED, AHK understand the potential of telepresence creatively, and telepresence is, you know, the use of it to build narrative and how you can build storytelling into the world that you can create, both through the imagery that you use, but then also how the actors, and in our case, you know, actors actually were the audience going into it, and how their interaction with it would respond to that narrative that was being created through the visuals. And that was a challenge to then work out how to explain that and communicate that in an artistic call out, and that would then invite people to apply with ideas that felt they could resonate with that technology. And then, of course, we had the added further layer of then the creatively embedded access. So asking people to also be thinking about access through, you know, through text, potentially through sign language, through description. So there's quite a lot of layers going on within that, and quite a lot to think about. And I think from our experience, we would build understanding in layers as well. And sometimes it wasn't until a certain level had been reached that you could add another layer on top, sort of getting people to understand everything holistically from the very get-go was quite challenging. But we did, when we put the call out, which we obviously it had to be bilingual, it had to be accessible. We tried to put as much information into that process as possible, and we also held online information sessions again. So this idea of just continuing to communicate about the potentials and the possibilities.
And in those information briefing sessions, we gave so 22 artists attended the briefing session, and we had a presentation from BOP about creatively embedded access and what that is, and also about telepresence and what that is. And there was space for questions as well. So I think we found that incredibly vital, about allowing people space to ask questions and to be able to really hone into how people were understanding what it was. We ended up that 8 artists applied for the opportunity, and we selected Jack Lee, and his idea was called, or his artwork proposal was called "The Importance of Sleep." And the proposal, it felt really visually strong. It had a sort of strong visual kind of potential for a story. And we could see all the potential for using creatively embedded access in it and telepresence. And I mean, all parties, so BOP, ADHK and Paul Sermon, felt that it was essential to continue supporting the understanding of the application of both telepresence and creatively embedded access. So it was vital for us to hold an onboarding session with Jack, the artist, allowing him space to discuss his initial ideas, specifically in relation to creatively embedded access and telepresence, and providing him with a few more tools, getting an idea of what his understanding was, and giving him some tools to start to use. Was absolutely vital. I've got another screen grab here that I'll bring up on screen, which shows it's actually exactly the same scene as we showed earlier, with Michelle from BOP and Kim from ADHK. But this time in it is myself from BOP, and I'm in the foreground, and I'm like holding my head as if I'm like in a panic that I'm shoulder deep in water, and Jack, who is the artist that created The Importance of Sleep, is in a wheelie bin and looks like he's screaming. And then on the right hand side of the picture, you can also see the other people who were involved in that call, in little Zoom boxes. So at the top, you've got the the team at ADHK, which includes some of their administrative staff and a Hong Kong Sign Language interpreter, because Jack, the artist we were working with, is deaf. And there's also a translator who was translating from Hong Kong Sign Language into English, and all the vice versa. And Paul is on that screen as well, and Grace also from ADHK. And again, we found the most direct route to understanding the potentials of telepresence was taking part in that experience. And yeah, we found that to be true with Jack, with the artist as well.
And Jack's idea was quite accessible in itself, I think. You know, it was a really accessible story in the sense that it's about the idea of what happens when we sleep. And in Jack's world, the Chinese god of sleep, Zhao Gong, appears in the internal landscape of the body and goes through a series of cleaning and cleansing stages. And this was the idea that he'd pitched to us. And we like this because you could see a set of almost immediately clear visuals, a process, a beginning, an end, the potential to, layer the access into that. It was interesting for us to try and support the development of the work in a way that didn't load on too much pressure all at once. So we were saying that idea of the layers, and the fact that we could see Jack and the collaborators in ADHK working on elements. We still had questions about, oh no, but what about this bit of access or that bit of access? But we had to work collaboratively in this sort of layering it up process. So there was, in a way, it was about utilizing the telepresence potential around the narrative as strongly as possible, and then starting to pull in the access elements and, for instance, the descriptive elements, or how different elements could be used. And of course, we hit the fact that for Jack, this was potentially also very a sort of challenging layer for him, because he didn't have, for instance, any lived experience of audio description or the need for that. So it was really fascinating for him to be speaking to us and taking on advice about thinking about the access requirements of other audience members and how they were going to access the work, and for him to be thinking about the captions, but also soundscape, and that as a way of building a further layer into the storytelling.
So we wanted to show a little bit of about the development of the artwork just through that process that Màiri was talking about. So we're just bringing up on screen a little excerpt from Jack's storyboard that he created. So you've got one column which talks about, it says, Zhao Gong is responsible for processing the waste in the large and small intestines, collecting them and depositing them into a large trash bag, imitating the intestine's excretory function. That's also below in Cantonese. And then the next column shows a visual of, I guess it's some kind of length of tubing, isn't it, Màiri?
Yeah, it's
tubing.
It's like a corrugated tube that could expand and retract. And that was the lovely thing about the visual world that Jack created. He was taking materials and everyday things and turning them into organs, which was it was very engaging.
So there was part of the piece, and you'll see some visuals of the piece very shortly in our presentation, but there was a mixture of live action and these sort of crafted materials. So underneath this picture of the tubing, it says, gather craft materials, red tubes, etc., and assemble them into a mimicry scene of the intestines. There's also some images of somebody with a trash bag, and there's an image of Zhao Gong and then an image of someone cleaning, a street cleaner. And underneath says Zhao Gong has a mixture of imagery of ancient Chinese figure and cleaning worker. And then the final column says water sound, and also sound of disposing garbage. So there's that kind of thinking about that visual and the story there. What isn't there? So the water sound and the sound of disposing garbage. We'd spoken with Jack about using sound to as an access point for people who can't who don't have access to vision. So them having those sounds as an access point. And that was a layer to bring in, but then also considering the telepresence layer, bringing that in as well, then added to that that kind of picture, that story and the potential of it to work for an audience. And I think, Màiri, it was yourself and Paul who developed that sort of idea with Jack.
I would say it was quite challenging for Jack to understand where the audience would go within the work. This had been talked about from the very, very beginning, but there was still a journey to go on in understanding that the audience entering the world he was creating, it would be better if they weren't passive. So I think there was a stage where Jack's vision was that the audience would just be there watching the action. So Zhao Gong would be doing the cleaning and the audience would be watching. So once he'd started to build up that visual world, Paul and I did one session where we went through it and talked a little bit more in detail about actually the narrative, and the work will come far more to life if the audience is seen as active, as actors within it, with actions to undertake, because you want them to be there and playing and engaged. And I think at that point it was these layers. Then there was this layered moment of going, of course, I'm probably thinking back to when he'd been in the wheelie bin and playing within that world, of realizing, yes, I need my audience to come into it and to be part of it and to be active in it. So for instance, in the section where Zhao Gong it's the intestines, we developed the idea of the telepresence audience moving within that. It was always going to be set up that there would be 2 audience members at once. We could do it that they could be repeated. So while there was, 2 audience members would appear in the world, they could appear multiple times. And of course, we can move them around. And once we started to explore that with Jack and the team, there was a bit of a light bulb moment of like, oh, right, so what can we do in each scene that the audience is either moving or engaging, or there's an action. So in the case of the intestines,
which we're showing on screen just now,
which has popped up on the screen. Unfortunately, in the case of the intestines, the audience became material moving through the intestines, and then falling out of the bottom and being swept up and put into Zhao Gong's rubbish bag at the end. But this became, it was silly, it was fun, it told the story of what was going on. But I think this scene worked very effectively, and Paul worked to animate the audience members. So you were just at this scene, you're just ahead, and you're moving through the intestines, and then being swept up by Zhao Gong.
We then moved into the sort of sharing of the artwork, and as we said, the artwork was going to be part of the Spark Festival in Hong Kong, which took place from the 18th to the 20th of October in 2024. So sharing the artwork, it really, again, there was so much around communication, and this time communication for audiences, and so really trying to communicate what telepresence is and what they could expect, for them to understand that they would then appear live in the video artwork on the Locked World website, and with another audience member who they probably wouldn't know, because they might be joining from somewhere else in the world. And the interactive video would be able to be viewed on the Locked World website by anyone anywhere in the world. And it was also able to be viewed at the Spark Festival in person at the Airside Shopping Centre in Hong Kong. So it was getting the audience to understand where this was going to be available, and also for them to understand what the expectation was for them engaging in the artwork, and that there wasn't any sort of like shoulds, but an invitation to help Zhaogong, the god of sleep, to clean the body, and just using those words quite lightly, so that people were still encouraged to play and to have fun. And we definitely noticed that audiences, they really needed someone else. If there was one person in the piece, they really needed someone else there to sort of play off of, and work out what was going on, and allow themselves to feel free enough to actually to play.
I was just going to ask you there, Morna, to remind me how long the piece is.
It was about 6.5 minutes.
And we did it, so I think you had a 30-minute or 20-minute time slot, didn't you? So it repeated. And I think
the chance for it to repeat like 3 times.
I think the benefit of that was that people, once they realised it repeated and they got to have another go, people got more, as it went on, got more and more inventive.
Oh, absolutely. What we're going to do just now is we're going to show you a little clip from The Importance of Sleep.
From 1 a.m. to 3 a.m, the liver undergoes detoxification. The liver is essentially a detox factory and a highly vascular organ. Zhaogong transforms into a great doctor. He uses a cloth to cleanse the internal wall of the liver, remove waste and toxins. This also helps promote blood circulation and boosts metabolism.
So that was just an excerpt of the wider piece, which obviously the full piece lasts 6.5 minutes, and you'll get a chance to play with that later on in today's events. We also just wanted to share a little image on screen of The Importance of Sleep, where it was installed at the Spark Festival in Hong Kong. So it just has a nice screen with The Importance of Sleep on it, and there were headphones for people to listen to the audio description as needed.
So we wanted to conclude by doing a little bit of reflection and looking back and looking at what some of the learning and challenges were. I think before we talk about the importance of sleep, I'm going to go back to that very initial idea we had about the fact that we wanted to test this out in 2 different ways. The second being how we could use it in a remote workshop environment. We've been working on a project with disabled artists in Nepal, which is resulting in a piece of work which we're staging. But in the development of that, we were bringing together disabled artists in Nepal and in Scotland to come together in Zoom in an online space and share stories and life experiences, and that we would hope to draw forward into the final piece of work. And Morna and I had seen this as a really exciting opportunity to actually use the telepresence world and to create worlds that they could enter together. Unfortunately, we didn't do this, and it's for a very dull reason, but a very hugely impactful one, which is simply that the internet connections were not stable enough or strong enough within Nepal for us to be able to do that successfully. So sadly, we haven't been able to test that way of using telepresence yet, although I suspect we will use it in the future. we just couldn't do it in that context where the internet was not stable enough. But we do see the real excitement and the potential of what that could be for people we're working with, and that sense of, you know, how experiential telepresence is in bringing you into space in a more embodied and playful way. And I think going forward, you know, and the next time we have an opportunity to use it or commission a piece of work, it is drawing that use of the accessibility into the very early stages of design and development, so that it doesn't become too much of a sort of final added layer. And I think that we fell slightly into that trap in this process. It's completely understandable. We were working with so many moving parts, so many partners. We were working across 3 languages. We were, you know, there was a lot going on. So it could be very interesting for us to look at some maybe, you know, mini commissions or developments that actually look at that creatively embedded access really as the focal point or the beginning point to really test the potential of that with telepresence.
When we're thinking about those future sort of mini commissions, we'll definitely take forward the feedback that we had from Jack, from the artist who was involved from Hong Kong. So we had a final session with him after the dust had settled, after the Spark Festival happening, because Jack went along to the opening of the Spark Festival and saw his work installed, and he told us that he was really moved by seeing an idea that he had for many, many years actually coming to fruition, and him being able to then to make it and to share it with other people. And he actually also spoke about him being able to be in it as well, and him being able to play in it as an active audience member, and that being really exciting. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time and finding out about this process. We hope that it's been interesting, and we look forward to answering any questions that you might have in our upcoming Q&A session. And we hope that you enjoy getting to play with the importance of sleep later on today.
An opportunity. I think they will be able to join us from Nepal. I saw them there a few moments ago. There we are, they're back again. Now I realise we might have a bit of an issue with audio here. We might be switching microphones on and off for our Q&A. Colin, do you want to handle this one? Sorry.
Hi, Morna and Màiri. It's great to hear about your experience of working with telepresence, and I was wondering how audiences have received the work. Both you presented at the Spark Festival, but also you've been presenting it online. I wondered what responses you've had.
So the audiences that we've had, we had some really wonderful feedback. Are you hearing us okay? Excellent. Okay, great. We had some really great feedback via feedback forms after the audience had taken part. They had spoken about how they felt really part of the artwork, and it helped them to engage with the story more because they were able to be in it and be active participants in it, which I think was really great. And they responded really well. That particular audience member really enjoyed the way that we had embedded accessibility into the piece. When people were engaging with it online, we did a lot of testing. We did some testing, and we did some taking part in it with other audience members during the festival, and that was really interesting in terms of just viewing how an audience interacts with the artwork. and particularly with one another. We found that audiences really needed at least one other person to be in the interactive artwork with them, to give them a sort of a sense of what they might be expected to be doing, but also a real sense of play with the other person, which was just really interesting to witness that sort of human behaviour element of it.
And I think because the piece looped the way it did, people were able to get an understanding of the form and then start to play within that, and that worked very well. I think that opportunity for two audience members to come into space together when they're on, other parts of the planet, was a great opportunity to create a level of engagement that some individuals otherwise wouldn't have. Just that excitement of realizing you're part of something that is at an international festival, when maybe you're living somewhere rurally in Scotland and you're not connecting to the arts very much. That was very exciting for audiences.
Yeah. Hi, Morna and Màiri.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Maybe Jane can ask the question now.
Yeah,
Jane.
sorry, we're having some sound issues and issues with mics. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great.
They can.
I just wanted to ask, during the residency, we discussed the job description for the artist role, and I remember Paul describing it as jobs for the future. And I just wondered, having gone through that process and seeing what the role became, how you describe that role now.
I think how we articulated and recruited in and created an opportunity for the artists that we ultimately worked with in this role certainly gave us lots of information about what needed to be articulated around the skills required. But I think maybe I hope it came through in some of the presentation, but it was a very, very layered process. And of course, we were working across 2 languages, working with new concepts for the artist. We were really working across 3 languages because Jack is deaf and a sign language user. And I think what was very interesting was trying to explain the skills required to work within telepresence and what would be the potential, while also, because of what we were doing and the commission we were doing, we were creating an opportunity for a disabled artist. We also, it's always impossible to find an individual with absolutely every skill you need, whatever the job description is. So it was always a case of discovering where, once we had an artist involved, where their skill set did match up with the project, and then where we needed to provide support or what we needed to explain in more detail. Yeah. Once Jack started to play with the form and realize what he could do within it.
Yeah, we were quite open about that from the start. We did a briefing session for any disabled Hong Kong artists who were interested in applying, and we were quite open at that point about the fact that we knew that there's a lot of different parts to this project and what the role needed to be, and that we would offer support where needed. And And yes, I'm glad that people seemed they seemed encouraged by that, because we did get quite a lot of applications, which was really reassuring that people were willing to take that leap of faith, and to know that they would be supported throughout the process.
Can you hear me all right? We switched back our audio seamlessly. Wonderful, that's how it should work. I just wanted to say, it wasn't so much a question, it's more of a comment, I think, really, is that I think what Birds of Paradise Theatre Company did with this project was something really unique. I mean, this hadn't been tried before, that they really wanted to make this not just about a performance to an audience, but really about engaging with an audience, making something that is much more a meeting point for artist, audience, participant coming together in a really, really unique way. And I think what you did in Hong Kong, in that part of that festival, to present it in that format was really, really unique and really challenging. And not only from the point of view of it being innovative, it was using so many different multilingual, multi-captioned, multi-sign language performance that was done in an extremely creative way. Every aspect of it that Jack Lee approached really took on board all those creative opportunities. So I just wanted to say that, and just say I really hope that this project has allowed Birds of Paradise to go forward with this and make other projects in the future using these sorts of things. So it was really, really exciting to see. Thank you.
On from Paul's comments about using telepresence in the future, I just wondered, since you recorded the presentation, or perhaps even before that, have you had any further ideas or developments in how you might use telepresence going forward that you'd be happy to share?
Well, we had actually hoped to be using it here in Kathmandu, in the project that we're working on just now. We are in the middle of making a new production, which is the result of connecting artists from Nepal and Scotland to write and devise a new piece of work. It had been our hope to use telepresence within that production potentially, so that the artists in Scotland could be present within the piece. Unfortunately, we're completely stymied by internet connectivity here, and also, frankly, the timeframes of the project and the pressure of trying to do complex things within certain timeframes. I have to say, I've just come from the theatre that we're ultimately going to be performing in next week, doing a workshop, and given that it took half an hour to get the Wi-Fi working and all the things that happened to us just now, I'm very relieved we aren't trying to use telepresence in the live sense that we had thought about. But I think for us, and I think I can speak for Morna and myself, when we first met Paul and experienced telepresence, we could see its potential in our, in creative practice, but also in workshop environments and bringing people together to explore ideas and have a more embodied experience within remote working. And remote working is a practice that the company had tentatively started looking at before the pandemic, and for reasons of accessibility that were not in any way preemptive of what was about to happen to our world. We were already thinking about the fact that for many disabled people, it's not easy, it's sometimes impossible to get to spaces to participate in things, as an artist in a learning environment or as an audience member. So the potential for us to use this now to be mindful of approaches in those contexts is really exciting for us. It's great to have that ability now. And because we sort of took a bite at something really complicated the first time, I think we'll feel much more, we will be empowered to try out different things in the future, and I feel like if we did that, we can do anything.
We're going to go to a break now.
We are. We're going to have to go to a
time.
break now. But thank you so much for joining us from Nepal. You're about 5 hours ahead of us, I think. There, so five and a half hours ahead. So, thanks so much for joining us and break a leg with the performance this afternoon and all the rest of it. So.
Yeah, good luck.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going to go to a break, unless there. I think that's the next.
Yeah. Are we there?
Do you want Colin's just going to...
Okay. Thanks, everyone. We're going to restart, and
we're going to just quick introduction, if you could. Then we're going to go.
Yeah.
1, 2. Yep. We're going.
I'm just going to make a quick introduction to the next presentation from CRIPtic Arts. I was really delighted that Jamie Hale took on this project. He's incredibly articulate, and is very powerful, the work that CRIPtic Arts are making, and it fits incredibly well with the theme of DaDaFest this year, around rage, and without further ado, we'll go into Jamie's presentation.
Wonderful, and this will have audio triggered by our AV team up there. There we go.
Hi, I'm Jamie Hale. Welcome to this part of the Telepresence talk, exploring CRIPtic Arts' involvement in the University of Brighton's Telepresence project. My name is Jamie Hale, and I'm the founder and artistic director at CRIPtic Arts. I'm a white person with dark reddish-brown hair and a ginger beard, and behind my head is a headrest. I'm wearing a black polo shirt. The background to the title slide shows me on my back on the floor in a manual wheelchair, wearing a silver t-shirt. Over it there is text showing the CRIPtic Arts logo and the word Telepresence. So, why did we get involved in the Telepresence project? We were excited about the possibilities. The image on this slide shows me in my wheelchair and D.L. Williams, a white deaf signer with short dark hair, stood behind a counter of sorts, signing in BSL, and we look like we're on the stage together. This is why we got involved, because actually DL was pre-recorded, but this project allowed us to create a space in which it looked like we were live together. That was the kind of thing we were excited about. Our main reasons for involvement were, I suppose, equity and the ability to work with anyone, anywhere, not just in one physical space, including at short notice. Audience access and delivering high-quality online work. Flexibility and being able to use pre-recorded and live performers together. Creativity and digital skills, developing and making work in new ways, including improving access. As a disabled-led organisation, we knew how difficult it was to balance the tension of theatre requiring performers to be in a specific place at a specific time, fit and well enough to perform. And these don't match with the realities of disabled existence. I wanted to take this on because I've staged my show Quality of Life is Not a Measurable Outcome at a range of points in my life where whether I'd be well enough to be on stage was questionable. And CRIPtic has worked with performers with similarly unstable health. And we've said, yes, we want to work with you knowing that they might not be well enough. We felt like improving our skills in high quality remote work would be able to enable performers who might not otherwise be able to work in theatre to do so. We're also conscious that for disabled audiences, the theatre isn't always accessible, and that while we try to do things like an online stream of our work, we try to deliver high quality British Sign Language interpretation, we try to caption our work, interpreters, translators that is, and captioners are expensive, and we can't always deliver this work to the quality we want. One of the reasons we were interested in the Telepresence project was this uniting of pre-recorded and live performance. And finally, we just wanted to develop our own skills. We're so interested in new ways of making work, and in especially how those can be combined with access. And one of the things that excited us about this was how captions could be developed within the Telepresence virtual stage. So there were lots of reasons for us to do this project. We came to Telepresence with a lot to learn. I was going to be the lead artist on it, and the photo on this slide shows me in my electric wheelchair wearing a hospital gown, with the wheelchair covered in sheets and resembling a bed, in another scene from the same show, Quality of Life is Not a Measurable Outcome. We used this image to create some of the digital elements of the project, as will be displayed later. Coming into the project, I was aware that I knew very little about things like image layering, video design and streaming software, and in many ways my personal priority was just to learn everything I could about what we would be doing. However, I think the elements that we were most interested in fell into three areas. Firstly, integrating remote, recorded and live performance, which opens the possibilities for people to perform pre-recorded or to perform live in different physical spaces. And I'll explore both of those in more detail later in the presentation. Secondly, we were interested in how the telepresence work could enable us to make more accessible theatre, creatively integrating things like captions in new ways. And thirdly, we were interested broadly in the creative possibilities of a remote virtual stage and how that could change the show. And we wanted to come away from the residency confident in creating our work using the software and equipment required. The slideshow shows one of the promotional images which we used as design inspiration for this project, with the word brave over my head and me seated in my electric wheelchair, wearing a silver shirt and leather jacket. Over my legs is text with the question, what happens when you're too expensive to keep alive? Staging my show is challenging due to health unpredictability, and we were interested in whether the telepresence work could get us towards a live from anywhere version. And the show also involved a range of elements that suggested various technical possibilities, which we wanted to explore as we learned during the residency for telepresence. The show was originally called Not Dying, but was renamed when I rewrote it a bit a few years ago. It's been staged in quite a few places, from home Manchester to the Lyric Hammersmith and the Barbican Centre. And one of the reasons venues have taken it is because we've been able to say, we've got a high quality recording. So if I'm too ill to perform the show, there will still be a show. With the Telepresence project, I wanted to explore whether I could perform the show live, just from home, if necessary. And then another reason for using my show was all of the technical and performance elements and the things it gave us to explore, moving from hospitals to the wider world, being reached and touched and moved, with captions and British Sign Language, the audience experience of being within a Zoom. There were so many elements that I felt that we could test and grow as we did the project. And throughout the presentation, I've got clips primarily from the show, arranged in a way that makes logical sense for the presentation, though not always the show's narrative. Fundamentally, in terms of a narrative arc, the show begins in a hospital, exploring the unexpected nature of survival, before pivoting to what it means to have survived as a disabled person in a world that judges you as too expensive, isn't adapted to you, and puts constant barriers in your way. We only worked on a small portion of the show for the Telepresence project, so the clips I'm using go from just before the end of Act 1, in which I'm in hospital and not necessarily expected to survive, into the beginning of the second act, with social care package decision-making, planning, conversations with my doctor, but also some of the more political poetry, things that critique the tropes and pressures placed on disabled people to be brave, the ways panels can control our lives, what it's like to have a body that is not welcome places, or a body that is physically cared for by others. Hopefully, the idea of knowing that we're exploring those themes will make the clips make more sense. I'm going to start by taking you through some of the things we explored and learned, often accompanied by video clips. This slide shows me in the manual wheelchair again, upright this time, with wings made of a hospital gown material bursting from my shoulders, and is the explorations and learnings slide. And with another fantastic image of DL and I appearing on the stage together when DL is actually a recorded video, I want to just outline what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to discuss the shape of the project, the creative possibilities of telepresence, creating different digital environments, using pre-recorded material and live performance, text and captions, physical interaction, and remote performers. So it's been an interesting project with 4 key segments. In-person and remote workshops to learn the technology, digital design setup and creation, the editing, the week-long in-person residency, of course, and the editing, finalising and reflecting. And the image on the slide comes from some of the digital design. Me on the virtual stage, back in my electric wheelchair, with the word Grace written over in front of me as we played with some of the creative captions. We worked on this project over a period of perhaps 8 months. During that time, we had a set of in-person and remote workshops designed to build our confidence and knowledge about the technology before we went into the rehearsal space. At that point, a lot of the digital design work was done to create the images and layers that we would then use within the software to create the experience of the virtual stage. The week-long in-person residency was where we filmed and recorded most of the material you'll see today. And then after that, it was the editing, finalising and reflecting. And we're certainly still reflecting, thinking about how we can bring this into our future work. So a key reason I wanted to do this was the creative possibilities, because a virtual stage has options a physical stage does not. Moving faces and distorting people and relationships, visual effects, moving between virtual environments. And the digital setup really enabled us to place me in a variety of scenes and settings. Normally at the beginning of the stage, I would be seen as in the inset image in the bottom left, showing my electric wheelchair made up to look like a hospital bed, me in it. However, on the virtual stage, as in the main image here, it was possible to put me in any environment. So we had me in a different style of hospital bed, surrounded by people in scrubs. Only in this image, their heads have been replaced with mine. This meant that as I moved my head, mouth and eyes live, they would appear to move, and the rest of the scene was made up of the physical outlines of the bodies of the people in scrubs surrounding me. The image of me speaking with the bodies and faces of doctors around me was already more realistic in some ways than the environment we could create on stage. But here we could go beyond that. By putting my face onto other people, we really highlighted some of the disconcerting, disorientating and depersonalizing elements of illness, I guess. And it was exciting being able to use the creative projects, the possibilities of the creative project to explore that. So the upcoming video comes from close to the end of the first act of my show. I'm lying in a hospital bed surrounded by a team of doctors, listing the futile treatments that have been offered, the treatment offers that have frustrated me. But as I speak, each of the doctors' faces is replaced with mine, creating something unnerving and disconcerting, until all of their faces become mine, and my mouth moves on every face as I speak. The section I'm about to show you comes at the very end of the first act of my show. I'm in my wheelchair on screen. Over me is a white blanket. Behind my head is a pillow. I'm wearing a hospital gown, and I have a catheter bag strapped to my leg. During the clip, wings beat as they appear from the sides of my chair and flap. I am surrounded with smoke. I contain hurricanes, and if they're going to unmake me, then you'd better believe I will welcome these winds. Our bodies weren't made to hold forces like these. Don't you see? I grew into myself the way of a crucible of gold under smouldering charcoal. And as the extraneous burns away, I remain. That section was designed to pretty much exactly mimic what happens in the live show, with haze and wings on the back of my wheelchair. We actually used an image of me with the wings to construct those digital flapping wings, or at least the team in Brighton did. I never quite grasped that element of the technical work. What we also tried to do was capture the sound of beating wings, so that whether you could see the wings, hear them, or both, you still ended up experiencing them. Another of the creative elements that opened up fascinating possibilities for me was the ability to move the show into lots of different spaces, places, and environments. The technology offered such a range of possibilities for doing so, with the on-screen virtual stage creating disconcerting visual effects, loading a zoom on screen as if the audience were in it, breaking the rules in that zoom, disconcerting them, mirroring and multiplying video, transforming the stage. And this slide shows two images from the zoom, one as a desktop computer loads a zoom, and the other as somebody begins to admit somebody else to a zoom. And one of the reasons I did this was because I was creatively interested in making the audience feel almost complicit in the social care decision-making panel, putting them inside it. In the theatre, I could only really project an image. But within this telepresence version of the show, I could really integrate the audience into the experience as they watch their own computer load up a Zoom. And once I'd created this Zoom environment, I could think about how I wanted to break the rules, come in and out of it, whether I on the stage could even see and hear it or not, and whether that kept changing. I've always been passionate about integrating British Sign Language into my work, and this slide shows a projection of me faded out on a screen with D.L. Williams sat in front of the screen signing. It comes from an R&D we did together, working on translating into British Sign Language in a way that kept a similar time and pacing to the spoken English. And I was really keen to work with the recordings from that during this project. Certainly, using pre-recorded BSL footage meant performance timings could be synchronous with the signing. We could work with footage of a performer more easily. It had an as-live feel, but also helped control costs. It looked brilliant on the virtual stage, but of course pre-recorded footage has no flexibility if the live performer forgets a line. Ultimately, however, the thing that decided it for me in terms of wanting to do this was the cost. This meant that I could deliver a high-quality virtual interpretation, a show with simultaneous BSL and English, rather than the BSL lagging behind the spoken English, and it could be done when we were in different physical spaces. And the next three videos show the same segment of the show in three stages of development. The first has me projected onto a screen as DL practices the signing in front of me. The second, DL is being recorded in front of a green screen, performing the work. And in the third, DL and I appeared to be on stage together, myself further back in my wheelchair, DL further forward behind a lectern. It's the same section of the show, but I'm performing it live, alongside the recorded version of DL.
We would take their historic buildings and build ramps to the entrance and paint them gold and sparkly and dare them. Just dare them to take them away. We would take their historic buildings and build ramps to the entrance and paint them gold and sparkly and dare them. Just dare them to take them away. We would take their historic buildings and build ramps to the entrance and paint them gold and sparkly and dare them. Just dare them
take them away. So this slide again has an image from that final video with me on stage and DL on stage next to me, even though we're in different physical spaces. Developing the BSL for this taught us a few things. Translating spoken English into BSL for simultaneous delivery is challenging. Creating a virtual as live stage was very effective, but that it would only work with complete precision from the live performer and a monitor where they could always view the recording, or slipping out of sync would be easy. Ultimately, working with BSL is working with another language, and the process of translation for DL and I required us to work really closely together, rewriting the English and the BSL, looking at when and where specific moments landed and how that would feel to an audience, and trying to capture coherence at 3 points. Signs that looked like the word they related to, such that it would be noticeable for hearing non-signing audiences. Words and signs that had an impact on the show's narrative or would provoke a reaction, landing at the same time, and tracking the emotional journey of the piece simultaneously. This meant at times we were looser on literal meaning. For example, listed buildings in English became shit old buildings in BSL. However, performing this work also relied on my ability to understand DL well enough that as I performed live with the Telepresence software, I could stay in sync with the rhythm of them. And I think without my rudimentary grasp of BSL, that would have been pretty impossible. And we also wanted to think about text and captions. And honestly, we didn't focus on them as much as we wanted to, but we still found that the virtual stage can make creative captions feel and seem more present and interactive, but doesn't allow for flexibility if a line changes. They can also be slow to design, import and change, certainly with the limitations we found in vMix. And in this slide, I'm sat in my wheelchair with the word brave in front of me curved over my head. I'm going to show a video next where the word brave shatters with the sound of breaking glass, and I continue. Brave. What complete and utter fuckers. And this slide shows an image of the moment the word brave shattered. Integrating creative captions is going to require a lot of intensive design work, and having the capacity for 3D interaction with them is really interesting but should be limited for emphasis. I found that the presence of the captions sometimes risked being very textually distracting in some ways, but also that they really added something. In creating a virtual stage, the words could be anywhere, in front of me, behind me, moving round me, or in a specific place. I feel like integrating captions into it is in some ways a lot easier than doing it on a physical stage because of the options open to me, but also harder because there are so many different ways of designing and delivering the slides. And it's definitely something that I want to work on in future, really making the captioning part of it. So that's something I came away with, I think, knowing it needed more development. Now, one of the most exciting elements of Telepresence for me was live distant collaboration, for which we worked with Jade Oyanhui, a deaf performer from Lazelle College of the Arts in Singapore, and we found that physical touch and coordination felt and looked startlingly real. The process of rehearsing movement and contact, however, was complicated and needed a lot of practice, and that the access barriers we had with communication were heightened by distance. There are 3 people in the photo on this slide, myself in the middle, still in my wheelchair, Jade to my left, a Singaporean woman stood wearing black leggings, a blue t-shirt and with long dark hair, and Steve Dixon, an older white man with short white hair in dark trousers and a grey short-sleeved shirt to my right. Steve is gesturing with his arm while Jade and I look at him. And the fantastic thing about this image is that Jade and Steve are in one room in Singapore and I'm in another in London. And yet in this virtual stage, it feels like we're together as a group. However, actually the only space we're in together is the virtual one. And doing this work with Jade felt very exciting and different from anything else I'd ever done, though there were also challenges. Establishing how to build a movement language and rehearse movement when we're in different places was easier said than done. I'm just going to show you a short silent clip in which Steve alternates between looking at the monitors and guiding Jade and I into place with gestures, trying to get everyone positioned correctly for the upcoming movement recording. And just so you know, this clip does not have sound. So the video I've just shown captured a moment of the rehearsal, and the next video shows Jade and I performing together. In this clip, she puts her hand on my shoulder. We look at each other. She walks around my wheelchair, crossing both in front of and beside me. They hold it. They're holding me, my increasingly motionless self. Is that not enough for them? I learned to live like this. I turned grief into motion, and I built myself a life. Thanks to my carers. Wiping my ass without scrubbing away my dignity. And this slide just has two images on it. One with Jade walking in front of me as we look at each other, and the other with her hand on my shoulder, me looking at her and her at me. And to me, those images really capture the multidimensional nature of the relationship we established. It didn't feel like we were flat faces on a screen. It felt like we were embodied people with the freedom to move in, through and out of the space, to physically connect, to contact each other and to withdraw. One of the things I found most interesting about this was how real it felt. And that sounds strange, I'm aware. Obviously, we weren't in the same place, and yet when she reached out and touched me, and I could see on the monitors that she was touching my shoulder, I could almost have believed that my shoulder was being touched, even though I was the only one on stage. Somehow, being able to see my movements live on the monitor screen as I worked meant that when I could see Jade and I in the environment I was in, it felt natural to believe she was there. Prior to this, I might have thought there was no real need for intimacy coordination with remote work, but having done this and realised how personal it felt, I think I would have felt strange if she'd reached out to touch me without checking first in some way, even though we were on different continents. The fact that the monitors weren't perfectly synchronous meant there was a slight delay, and this made some of the movement rehearsal quite challenging. The ability for Jade and my bodies to connect in physical space relied on us both knowing exactly where to put our limbs at what moment in a three-dimensional empty space. And in the last part of this presentation, I'm going to explore some of the challenges, successes and disability-specific learnings and think about what's next for the show and our telepresence work. This slide is another photo from my show. It shows me in a hoist sling on stage, dangling from a hoist, wearing a silver t-shirt and no trousers, my catheter bag on display. My wheelchair is empty beside me, and projected behind me is the phrase, "I'm gay," in large letters on a screen. So let's begin with the successes. In the background of this slide is another image from the beginning of my show. My face, similar to the clip where it appeared on the doctors' faces, but here the doctors have their own faces, and I'm spotlit in the dark. The key successes I found were the proof of concept that telepresence would work for us, that you could perform from different places, that you could integrate live and pre-recorded work, the interactivity of captions, and the various creative ways to enhance the show. And the key successes from the project for me were also that we learned more about the technology, the directions for development, and even that we applied some of the confidence, even if not these exact skills. By the end, we felt like we had a proof of concept and that we were using tools and technology we could carry forward with the show and our other work, that we could deliver a high quality performance from lots of spaces, and that we could work in more accessible ways because we had the knowledge and expertise to bring performers into a virtual space if we couldn't in a physical one. And even last minute in a theatre, this could allow for someone to be projected onto a screen and still be on stage, even if they couldn't be there. The pre-recorded British Sign Language actually also worked a lot better than I'd been worried it would. It wasn't perfect, but it really showed that with the right show in the right way, this can be done. And it shouldn't replace having a deaf signer performing live alongside me, which is still the way I want to deliver this work. But it would allow for me to put in that layer of accessibility in the digital contingency version of the show, if I chose to. I thought the creative worlds that were made were fantastic. Being able to perform live on a virtual stage, but also be in Zoom, shifting environments, building and moving captions, destroying them, interacting with them. Because everything is virtual, it somehow made the space feel more interactive than a physical stage would. And the final success was that application of confidence around digital work to our 2024 show at the Barbican, The Acts. When during show week, one of the performers developed COVID, we had to swap from in-person rehearsals with them, but they still felt well enough to perform and wanted to do so. Eventually, we could record a filmed version of their part, which we projected onto fabric hanging down from the ceiling. It wasn't about the technology from the Telepresence project. The video was pre-recorded, but it was about the fact that we believed we could make it work, which was so powerful. And it allowed us to take forward those learnings to make the show happen in a way that was as accessible as possible and without losing a performer at the last minute. So there were a number of challenges on the project that related kind of more specifically to access. Finding a space that met project demands, setting up a green screen with wheelchair-safe floor coverage, the amount of equipment, the physical barriers in the space, the ways in which the green screen technology didn't recognise the outlines of a disabled person, the technical learning curve, and the difficulties around hearing impairment. This image shows me in the telepresence space in my wheelchair, not the virtual stage, but the actual physical space I was in. My wheelchair is on green flooring. I'm on the left of the image, and on the right there are two monitors. On those monitors, Jade, the Singaporean performer, appears with her hand on my shoulder, even though when you look at me on the left, it's clear that she is not here with me. There are bright lights pointed at me, and everywhere is surrounded by tripods, lines, and wires, which really shows how difficult it was to find a space that would be accessible for a project like this. One of the things I really took away from the difficulties I had communicating with Jade was just that I should have taken more time to explore both of our access needs and make sure we had what we needed in place. However, it was an absolute delight to work with her, and by the end of the rehearsals, I felt we had a really productive, satisfying synchronicity that meant we were working together really excellently. And having talked about those challenges, there were certainly disability-specific learnings to take forward in the future development of this work as well, alongside things to consider when creating other new work. The main learnings we identified were that equipment setup requires more time to make it safe for wheelchair users, and that this time needs to be allocated ahead of rehearsals so we know what we're doing. That accessible work takes more time in general, and that more time needs to be allocated to doing it than we had done. That people may have different access requirements when working with new technologies, and we need time to gather those requirements and meet them. And that when working with neurodivergent people and complex software, tools or equipment, we really need clear, simple, illustrated instructions. The image on this slide shows me in my wheelchair parked in front of and on the green screen. To the right of the image is a monitor, and on that is a tiny bit of footage, but the focus of the image is the scale of the green screen and on what I look like placed on it. I chose it because it gives a sense of how trapped I was in the space once everything was set up around me, but also a sense of the size of the screen we needed. That was the smallest I think we could have gone, while still being able to have me surrounded well enough to capture the footage. And my wheelchair's wheels, as you can see by the creases, kept pulling up the fabric as I drove over it. This, of course, is why many electric wheelchair users don't have rugs at home. But because of this challenge, I had to stay still as much as possible, rather than moving the chair around the space. While every piece of software has a manual, many have very steep learning curves, and I think creating a pack with some simple, clear, illustrated instructions for using tools like vMix to create a virtual stage, that would have been really helpful for us. Because as a team, I think there were times when we kind of struggled to learn all of that. And as I come to the end of my talk, I just want to think a bit about what's next. So the image for this slide is from behind the lights and cameras. Al, our lighting designer, is working on a laptop. Between the laptop and the green screen, where I am, you can see the obstacle course of monitors and lights and wires that left me pinned into the small space at the end. In terms of what we'd do next, with enough time and money, I think we would develop video layers for the whole show, so the lead performer could appear with just head and shoulders, performing from bed, for example. We would integrate live audience elements, like voting and commenting that could appear on the virtual screen. We would create BSL and caption layers for the full show. We would record and develop it in a studio that had green screen painted walls and floors and safe cable management for safety, so I could really explore movement freely. and probably also get a camera-compatible teleprompter and monitor specifically for live captions to try and manage and prevent previous issues arising. Developing those video layers is probably the most important next step, because it's one of the key elements of making sure the show could be performed live from almost anywhere. But the audience interaction elements do also excite me. Could they vote on what characters do? Could their comments appear on stage? Could they be writing in and it coming up on screen? Finding ways for it to work effectively on a virtual stage is something I'd love to explore. And I'd also really like to create the BSL and captioned layers for the full show. I was really pleased and excited by the work that DL and I had done and the potential for integrating captions, because having both of these fully embedded would be fantastic. However, when DL and I worked on a small section, it took about 3 days to translate 3 minutes of the show. We rewrote all the text to work fluently in both languages, but I think we'd be a lot quicker now doing it because we have established that process. Overall, there was a lot to learn, I guess, in this, but there was a lot that we took away, and I'm really happy about what we've achieved. This final slide shows me on the bottom right in silver t-shirt with a blanket over my legs, seated in my electric wheelchair. Behind me is the text, "Quality of life isn't a measurable outcome." Superimposed on top is the CRIPtic logo and the text, "Thank you."
Thank you to Jamie Hale for pulling that presentation together. I think that it's a lot to unpack. There's a huge amount of layers and elements to that piece that that you've produced. And Jane, I think you were going to talk a bit about how it goes beyond access.
Yeah, I mean, I think across that and the Bird of Paradise piece, just the way both companies have used telepresence and embedded it from the start as a creative tool rather than something that's kind of access being layered on afterwards has been really, really important. And it's, I think there's a number of things that come through in the presentations for me. Partly the kind of hybrid possibilities in multiple locations, and that these pieces that both theatre companies have made aren't live performances in a theatre that you can access remotely. All the locations are equally valued, and then that kind of possibilities for audience experience, which I think Birds of Paradise appeared to describe as embodied and immersive. And I think Jamie, they really talk about it where you become, the audience actually becomes implicit in the piece when they get kind of sucked into the Zoom, which is something that feels like it's only possible working kind of in this way. And then I think just last, I just wanted to pick up on Jamie's point about the intimacy of that they felt in the work with Jade, who was on another continent, and I wasn't actually there for when they filmed that scene, but I've watched the recordings of it, and I could really feel that in the kind of care and time and attention that was taken in how and where Jade placed her hand and how Jamie interacted with that, which was actually really moving to watch and kind of really surprised me in a piece that that you're kind of viewing remotely. So I felt that was a really integral and really important part of the work.
Yeah. It's I encourage everyone to see the piece. Paul, we're sort of, as we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you what you've learnt from working with CRIPtic and with Birds of Paradise.
Yeah.
How that's what's next?
Absolutely, really exciting things. I mean, it's so much. We've learnt so much from this project, working with these two companies, and how they've approached it. And I think one of the things that the sorts of things that Jamie was talking about at the end, I think is really important for the kind of studios of the future that we need, the kind of environments we need. Like here at FACT, we're in a centre of technology and media, but we need spaces where people can go in and use these facilities in a way that is accessible. The sort of green screening environments, the sound, we can see it here. We're surrounded by a lot of cables here as much as we can be, but we've avoided things as much as we can do. But we need to design that around the inclusion of everybody that can take part. And I think it's what's really important. What Bob really picked up on was that it's the inclusion of the performers who are remote, who don't have to travel to that location, but they can come in from anywhere in Scotland where their main focus is. But they also get the inclusion of the audience. The audiences don't have to travel to Glasgow and see those works. They can see it from multiple places, but in so many more better ways than you can on Zoom or other kinds of online tools. But to really be in that space, be in that performance space with those people. And that was the bit that Jamie was really talking about, that almost that epiphany moment, that eureka moment where he suddenly thought, wow, I feel like Jade and I are in the same place. That is incredible, that moment that happens, and then everything suddenly unfolds and you sort of think about all these things that could happen. And so this project comes to an end at the end of this month. So this is really our sort of culminating event, really. But there's so much to take away and include in our case studies on these two projects, which will add to our other 9 case studies we have from other theatre companies using telepresence. And they're all available on our website. And those resources, they are there. We just need to get them out now and people can use them and start to develop them. But I do hope, particularly, I'm in conversation with Jamie already about what happens next and the next project we want to do.
Fantastic.
Great.
That's great. Yeah. Are there any questions from the audience at this point before we come to a close? Emma?
Do we have any online questions?
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm a white woman in my 20s with long blonde hair, and I'm wearing a grey cardigan and a white face mask. Thank you so much. I think it's really exciting opportunities that having a different form or way of presenting theatre online for accessibility. And as you know, post-COVID, there are less online opportunities for theatre. I was wondering whether there's any, what you thought of the challenges or opportunities of working hybrid, so having a performer in the space while also having the recording or a telepresence behind them, and what the differences could be between what people see online versus what the people see in the room. Whether for example, audio description, how that would work if things are different, and what you saw of that relationship being going forward.
I can try and answer a bit of that. It's a really, really good question and very important, and it's really something that CRIPtic and CRIPtic Arts, Jamie Hale, really wanted to develop, work on. That whole idea of what hybrid performance looks like, online and in theatre hybrid. And I think Jamie touches on it at the end of his presentation, which is also that the challenges in doing that are also about the institutions we can work in, the environments and places we can work in, the theatres need to be ready for that. Actually, there's new jobs, actually, what Jane was referring to earlier on. There's new employment, new opportunities for people, for creative theatre people to work in this area, to bring about those kinds of online hybrid experiences. Productions, there's so many people involved in a production. There are some missing key people in all of that, I think, that can play a part. I think the important thing is not, my own belief is, don't do it the way the National Theatre did it. Unfortunately, the way the Arts Council ploughed money into it, don't do it that way. Don't turn it into TV, because we've got TV already. And don't just sort of show us a film of the theatre, make it different, make it another experience. Let's have transmedia experiences of theatre. One may be on stage, one may be online, one may be through an app or any other sorts of things, but there might be multiple ways of experiencing that story, which is so much more exciting than just sort of getting another sort of televised version of a theatre piece. That's kind of my challenge to that question, I think.
Thank you. I wonder how you thought the audience interaction could also factor in that, with audience obviously in person, also online. As Jamie mentioned, people could vote. I wonder if you'd had any conversations around how that could work in the future, or if, for example, I was thinking, could the performers be on the Zoom call as well? And could the technology mean they brought in on that as well? Yeah.
Absolutely, they can, and that's the way to go. In that, Jamie was talking about that at the end. I mean, one of Jamie's challenges is that he can be in a position where it's not possible to get to the stage. He he can't move, and just a head and shoulder shot is all you're going to get at that point. But the show can go on because we can use that in different situations, and that may be the case for all sorts of different people in different situations. Today we're doing. You can see with the BSL today, we're not using green screen. We're using background segmentation, which is an AI or machine learning technology that just takes out the background. We don't need a green screen for that. There's things like that we can do, so people don't need to have to set up green screens and complex things to be in the performance. They could be at home, online, taking part with other technologies that can do that. One of the things during the pandemic, one of the pluses that we got was that there was so much new technology was being developed. Actually, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of new ideas were taking place. That's so sad that that's just dried up, and we're now looking at, we sort of, let's go back to the way we did it before, or let's just. The AI discussion has kind of taken over, and it's all very visual wallpaper, really, but it's not innovative in terms of inclusion and participation as it could be.
Thanks. Any more, Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm a white woman in her latter part of the years, wearing glasses and a flowery dress. I was actually what Jamie was saying at the end about spaces. It really, really does have implications for theatre companies and where you go on tour, to kind of really understand how you might set up all that hybrid experience. It would be fantastic to think that if a performer who might not be able to perform on one night could be, incorporated in a pre-recorded show. But this has a huge amount of sort of like implications, doesn't it, for understanding the scale of the size of the venues that you perform in and the actual setup of your set. And with that, how do you... That's sort of one side of thing that I'm thinking about, but how do you look at scale? I'm visually impaired, and it's quite interesting for me when you have recorded actors on stage, because it can be sort of magnified to show people's facial expressions. But if you're trying to incorporate a pre-recorded performance and a live performance to try and show scale in a sort of human scale, inverted commas, how do you sort of do that to sort of get the scale right every time? There's a lot in that sort of questions, but I'm sort of thinking about how do you play with scale and what does that mean in terms of human scale or magnification, etc.
Well, a lot of the pilot case studies play with scale a lot, don't they, Paul? There's a lot of kind of toying with the idea of scale and people at different performing together, but in relation to scale, one being kind of very small and one being very large, and the possibilities are kind of endless, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, and there's some of the. I mean, I think there is again, theatre requires a lot of not just change, but the way theatre tends to think. I think it needs to also needs to move forward or adapt or bring about new kinds of opportunities within it. Some theatres can do that. Some theatres can't or don't want to. Right? Maybe. I think but it's not just the theatre. It's also people who relate to that earlier question. It's also people who are at home taking part. Audience participation, whether it's recorded or whether it's remote. A lot of people are restricted to the size of the space that they can work in. Most rooms, you don't get much rooms that are bigger than 2.5 to 3 meters wide. So that's the sort of limit you're kind of working with. But some people worked with multiples with different scales, as Colin was saying, and then we did things with rostrum cameras, and people performed with their hands underneath the camera, so you had very sort of large hands involved in a performance as well. So the scale was quite different. We could have zoomed in shots and out shots that are zoomed out. It could be all sorts of ways. I mean, maybe there's ways of offering audiences opportunities to zoom in and zoom out themselves into some of these cameras, some of these shots. So you could say, oh, well, I want to go closer in on that particular performer. I want to zoom in or I want to zoom out. Maybe there's ways of having different experiences for different people. They want to have different, depending on how you want to view it. I remember.
I'm just thinking as well, just hearing you talk about that maybe that offers opportunities within a theatre as well as for remote viewers, because you do have different seating and people can see different things, and if you could zoom in and out or have other ways of accessing it within the theatre as well, that may address some of that and also access issues within a theatre as well.
Yeah. There could be different. I mean, one of the. I remember years ago. And now the artist, I can't remember the artist's name, but there was a drama that was a German production, a drama that was on television on 2 different channels, and you could switch channels and get different views of the dialogue between the people. Right. So actually, with the viewer had the choice of whether they wanted to listen to it from one person's point of view or the other person's point of view, and they could switch between the two. And maybe there's ways we can play with this. This is all live. So there's no reason why we can't explore those kinds of things and have multiple channels for experiencing things differently. It could also be in different languages, of course. We can have different audio description in different languages, just as a soundtrack. So we can do it in all sorts of other ways. Narratives, the kind of script can be revealed in different ways according to the viewer's choice or interaction.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks. We've gone slightly over time, so I kind of feel we should bring it to a close now. And thank you to FACT for giving us their space, and to Dada for allowing us, hosting us here.
And thank you to you, Colin, and Disability Arts Online, and to Joe and Kate and Trish and all the team here. Thank you so much for bringing it together.
And after the lunch break, there's going to be a live demonstration as well with the Birds of Paradise.
Exactly. We'll demo the Birds of Paradise project. It'll be offline, I'm afraid, this one, but it will be a more informal opportunity for people to gain some technical knowledge and exchange of ideas in the workshop this afternoon.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming.